how to build high performance, self accountable teams. That sounds like a massive challenge. But Wayne is going to tell us how. Wayne, where can people find you?
Hey, Tim, people can find me at uglymugmarketing.com. Email addresses, social media channels, all of that is in that one simple URL.
Fantastic. So, Wayne, just give us a background about what you do. And obviously, we're not, we one of the rules that we have is that we don't have any pitching, but we want you to talk about what you do, your background, and what have you built there at Ugly Mug Marketing.
Sure. So, what I would say, Tim, is that my background and what my passion is building unique things. So, no matter what business I've been in, so in the past, I had a lawn and landscape company. My goal with that business was to build a unique company, something different, something that customers would want to talk about. You can kind of see from the room that I'm sitting in here that I value things that capture attention, things that are different and outside the norm. So Ugly Mug Marketing really is that. We are a marketing agency, and our goal is to be different than that of our competition. And what I've discovered over the years is that if you want to be different in the marketing world, you have to focus on different things. And so for us, that means we focus on results. And in the marketing world, there's lots of what I would call vanity metrics that get thrown around, impressions and reach and all of those things. And they have their place. But at the end of the day, for most for-profit businesses or organizations that come to us, results are more money in the bank account.
Yeah.
And so that is our niche. That's what we aim for.
Right. So in the world of building teams, we talk about strategy and we talk about culture. And there's a famous quote, isn't there, that culture eats strategy for breakfast or something like that. Mm-hmm. So when you're building your company, how do you put those things together?
Sure, absolutely. So what I would say is, as we've come through the pandemic, one of the things that I constantly heard people talk about was that the pandemic broke their culture. And I would always lean into that conversation and challenge people to begin thinking, what if it didn't actually break your culture? What if it merely revealed the true culture that was there? Because when things are easy, when things are going well, that's not a true test of the culture that you have in place. One of my favorite quotes is this, that leaders aren't needed when things are easy. Leaders aren't needed when things are easy. And the same is true about our culture that we have in our organization. Every single organization has a culture. The question is, what is it and when is it actually revealed?
Because I have a friend who works for a bank here in the UK, and he's one of these people that has to be able to look down the side of his terminal and see his team sitting there. If they're not sitting, where's Steve? He's had more than an hour for lunch.
Yep. That is the classic definition of a low trust environment and a low trust culture. And look, you can have, as an entrepreneur, as a manager, or as a leader, you can have whatever culture you want to have. But if you want a culture that is high trust, you're going to have to work at that culture. You're going to have to work on cultivating that. An interesting thing, Tim, is that the word culture comes from the same Latin word as cultivate. And so when we think about cultivation, it's a farming term, right? We have to cultivate the soil. We have to break up the hard soil. We have to loosen the soil. We have to tend to the soil. We have to pull the weeds out of the soil. We have to add nutrients to the soul. So if you want a high trust, high performance, self-accountable culture, you have to learn to cultivate that into your organization.
And that starts at the top.
Absolutely. The most difficult person you will ever have to lead is the person who looks back at you in the morning in the mirror. So what I would challenge people to begin thinking about is, instead of pointing the finger and looking at, the person down the row who's been at lunch for 33 minutes instead of 33, I would begin by looking in the mirror in the morning and saying, how can I lead myself a bit better today? How can I not tolerate excuses, the excuses that we all make every single day for ourselves? How can I learn to live with integrity with myself first before I demand it from other people?
one of the things that you talked about when we did the preparation call was about the fact that leadership tends to be about suspicion, but leadership has to start with trust. You have to say, I trust you all, rather than that you're going to come to me and you're going to build trust with me. You start with trust.
Absolutely. And it's so counterintuitive, right? Particularly in US, American culture, distrust is like the name of the game. Like we don't trust people by default. And it's global as well, but some places there is more of a default to trust. But what I can tell you is this, that you have to have those conversations very early on with people. And you have to let them know, look, our default response is trust. But in the moment of decision and in your moments of action, you as a team member here have the ability to either build additional trust or to build suspicion. So when you make those decisions, whether that's to send the report when you say you're going to send the report, to show up on time, whatever those little things may be, ask yourself, am I building trust in these interactions or am I building suspicion in this instance?
So how do you build a high performance culture?
That's a loaded question. There's lots of things to do, again, because it's about cultivation, right? It's about the soul. It's about this constant work. But what I believe to be true is that if we think about like a grid with an axis, so we got an x-axis and a y-axis.
Yep.
What I would say is that on one of those axes, you have high alignment, and on the other one, you aim for high autonomy. And so as you move towards where those two meet, you're going to have low alignment and low autonomy. So most organizations today fluctuate somewhere between, the combination of those two things. In other words, low autonomy, low alignment, or they have high alignment but no autonomy, or high autonomy but no alignment. And what we have to do as leaders is, when I say alignment, our teams have to be aligned around our mission, our vision, our values, all of those things that we know, but we're often too busy, quote unquote, doing important work to focus on those things. And what I can tell you from experience is that was me for years. Yeah. For years, I didn't have time for that touchy-feely stuff, right? I was busy growing a business. But what I've discovered is that we have to get crystal clear about where we're going, why it matters, and how we're going to get there, which is, again, mission, vision, values. And we have to ensure that our team is fully aligned around those things. And when we do that, we can then give a lot of autonomy. Because if you have an organization that you give a lot of autonomy to, a lot of team members that you just give autonomy to, but they're not aligned, you're going to have chaos because everyone is running around doing whatever they want. But when you have high alignment around the mission, the vision, and values, and you give your team high autonomy to execute based on their gifts, their abilities, what you will have is you will have an organization that can actually scale. You will have a culture that produces growth and produces high performance because you are imparting trust on your team. You are saying, here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. Here's why it matters. Here's how we're going to get there in terms of our values. Here's what's going to guide us on that path. And then you're turning them loose to do their best work.
I know that I did a podcast recently on my top 22 business books of all time. And one of them is this one, which is Lost and Found by Rand Fishkin. And he basically echoes that, which is that he says that your values and your culture are in effect your guardrails that you grab hold of when things get difficult. And we have to make difficult decisions and when we're in leadership. And we're not necessarily a popularity. It's not a popularity contest, but having those things that we can actually hold on to is the when things get rough, we can reach out for those. Would you agree with
Absolutely. That? Absolutely. I'm not familiar with that book or that author, but 100% agree with that. I have a friend who runs an organization. They have about 800 employees, and he's one of the two co-founders of that organization. And he regularly talks about how, as the organization has grown, his role has become what he calls the CRO, the Chief Reminding Officer. In other words, What are those guideposts? Why are we aiming towards this mission? Why are we aiming towards this vision? And what are the guiding principles? What are our values that are going to ensure that we stay on the right path to getting there? And one other note that I would love to bring up, Tim, is this, that, Enron was a company here in the States that
I think I've heard of it.
is, yeah. Infamous would be the right
Yeah.
term.
The crooked inn,
One
yeah.
of their six core values was integrity. And so if you were to walk into their corporate office in Texas, on the wall was integrity as one of their core values. And obviously, if you know their story, they did not do things with integrity. And so the question is, how do you have core values, but you don't live those core values? And here's what I would say is that a value isn't a value until it costs you something. A value isn't a value until it costs you something. So for them, it was just a platitude. It was just a nice word. It was something that felt good.
They
Right?
got the consultants in, and the consultant said, you need these words. Job done.
Exactly. But until it actually costs you something, and until you can show your team how you're willing to sacrifice for that value, then it's not truly a value. It's merely a word that makes you feel good.
So give us an example.
Sure. So one of ours is that we create remarkable experiences for people. And so a question comes up: if someone is going through something, let's just say that they had a loss of a family member, someone in their life passed away. So the question isn't, do we do something for that person? The question is not about that. The question is, we're going to do something. We're going to do something remarkable for that person to be there in that time, that difficult time. And so it doesn't matter. Like there's no need to get approval from me. There's no need to, ask, do we do something? Do we not do something? It's a core value. And so the question for all of us to think about is, when we look at our core values, when we list out our core values, what price have you paid to live up to that core value, to each of those core values? And if you can't answer that question, then it's probably not a true core value.
Yeah. So I'm reading when I met you for the prep thing, I made so many notes. So I'm busily looking down. I'm actually going to bring my notebook up. So I'm actually looking at you, and I'm able to look at my notes at the same time. Now, you talked about I've written 3 things, and then I've written they have to truly believe that we have their best intention. We have to push them into places into discomfort, and then there's periods. So you talk about having high performance teams are like muscles, as in muscles, not the shells.
Right.
And the fact that you need to actually push them into or out of their comfort zones, but also then keep them in comfort. Talk us through that. Talk me through my notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I believe to be true, if you're going to build out a high performance team, just like you just said, Tim, we think about going to a personal trainer to get in physical shape. The personal trainer, any personal trainer worth their weight or worth their salt, is going to push you. They're going to challenge you. They're going to make your muscles hurt. Right? But then they're also going to give you time to recover, to allow that muscle or those muscles to recuperate. And so there's 3 core ingredients that I believe are so true when leading anyone and building a culture of people who learn to do hard things, who learn to excel. And it's this: number 1, they have to truly believe that you and I have their best interests at heart. In other words, we're not trying to manipulate them. We're not trying to just get them to perform on the job and work them as much as we possibly can. They have to believe that we have their best interest at heart, and that's where it begins. That is the foundation. So again, it goes back to the mirror. If that is not true for you, go back and examine. Ask yourself, what would have to be true? What do I need to work on in myself, so that I genuinely care about the people I lead, that I'm invested in their lives, not just at work, but I genuinely want to be invested in their lives. So that's number 1. The other 2 things are, we have to learn to push people into discomfort. We have to push them outside of their comfort zone. That's the only place that growth occurs.
Yeah.
But then, to be wise as a leader, we also have to understand how much to push and how much to give periods of rest. In other words, if we're constantly pushing people outside of that comfort zone, we're going to create bad stress. There's two different types of stress, and we're going to create the wrong stress, right? We're overusing a muscle if we're using, the analogy of working out. We're
Yeah,
overusing it. So those three things we have to learn to keep in balance.
I totally agree, and I think that um, one of the things that I believe, I like you run a small company. Um, Therefore, I know in a way, quite often, I will be a training ground for them to move on to do something else. And what I want is, in effect, sometimes if I'm honest with myself, I actually believe that I will train my people to leave. And in a way, when I'm saying that because I want to try and feel comfortable with it, because it's like it's so disingenuous as a leader to say that. But in a way, that's what I want, because um, I had someone leave recently, and we had it was such a sad thing when he resigned. But he came to us and my business partner, he said, I am just so different than when I arrived.
Yeah.
You've opened things up in my head that I just didn't know. But that kind of is the reason why I now need to move on. What do you say about that in terms of the development of your people, about creating, if you're creating high performance, what do you do about the development?
So 100% agree with you, Tim. And as counterintuitive as that thought and that feeling are, like what more of an accomplishment, what more of a reward could you possibly have as a leader than to raise up other leaders, right? Your job as a leader isn't to raise up other followers, right? That's not our job as leaders. And if we're going to build a culture of high performance, we have to raise up other leaders. And as painful as those conversations are when people do leave, the reward comes from knowing that when they go into their next thing, whatever that may be, that they are better as a result of having been with us. And I tell people, one of the very first conversations I have with people when they join our team is exactly that. It's, look, you're probably not going to be here forever. I'm not saying I want to get rid of you. I'm not saying I want you to go anywhere, but chances are you're probably not going to be with our company forever. But what I want to be true is that when you leave here, you are better as a result of having been here, and not just better as it relates to marketing, not just better as it relates to whatever the thing that they're going to do, but better as a human being, better as a leader, better as a sibling, a husband, a wife, a whatever it may be, right? Holistically, much better person as a result of being here. So, I was going to say, in order to do that, if that is truly your belief, then you have to be intentional about the way you train people. And what I see so often is, number one, there's no intention around training. There's this vacillation between frustration and micromanagement versus truly investing and leading people into discomfort, right? As entrepreneurs, we tend to go on this roller coaster where we ignore so many things, and all of a sudden we blow up and we jump in and we start micromanaging, and we, express all of our frustration. And so I view it as, we want this even path, right? We want this slow, steady incline where we're slowly pushing people, building people, and helping them become better versions of themselves.
And that's about giving people autonomy, though, isn't it? And actually allowing them to make mistakes.
Yes, absolutely. Somebody just recently shared a clip of Steve Jobs with me, and it was when he had left Apple and was doing Next, I think is the name of the company, when he had left. And someone asked him, a reporter asked him, what did he learn as a result of having been at Apple and then leaving? What was his biggest takeaway? And he pauses. I mean, it's like a very awkward, like 30-second pause. And he basically goes into this short clip where he says, one of the things that I've learned is that I now take the long approach with people. I now no longer jump in and try to solve the problem, but understand we are doing great work. And to do great work, that means great people are going to make great mistakes. And it's not my responsibility to fix the mistakes. It's my responsibility to ensure we're still doing great work.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly that same sentiment.
Yes, and I think it's I've heard lots of there's lots of stories. There's the one there's I think there's persons at IBM where something happens where it loses $1 million or something, and the leader basically calls them in, and the person says, "I guess you're going to fire me." He said, "No, fire me." He says, "I guess." He said, "No, you've just had a $1 million training lesson or something." It's like, and that's what it is. It's about understanding that we're human, we make mistakes, and allowing the person to make that mistake and hoping they're
Yeah.
going to learn something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so often as entrepreneurs, what happens is we love being the hero. And that's part of just the entrepreneurial DNA, right? We love to solve problems. We love to help people. And so when we start building out a team, what I find happens so often is that we are so used to being the hero that we don't allow other people to develop the skills to be heroes themselves, right? So we jump in, we give them the answer, we fix the problem. And so for years, I had to personally work on this. I used to keep a sticky note on my computer that said, ask, don't answer. Ask, don't answer. Because when you constantly just give your team the answer, in other words, here's exactly what to go do, you are not training them to lead. You are training them to follow. And so that lesson for me was a hard one to learn.
Danny's made another great point, which is that comes back to culture. It's not about making a great place to work. It's about making a place where great work is done.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Lovely. Thanks, Danny, for that. Wayne, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about high performance teams. I find it just a fascinating subject, probably because I'm a leader as well. And things change as well over time, and people's attitudes change, and you've got to. It's just something you've got to keep up with.
Absolutely. What I would say, Tim, is that most of my team makes up the generation where people say they don't want to work, that they're lazy, they're distracted, they're all these other things. But what I can tell you is that is not the case. When you build the environment and the culture correctly, it's amazing what can take place, regardless of the generation, regardless of the stereotypes that we all too often subscribe or put on to certain groups of people. So I completely agree. It's a fun and challenging thing to do.
Wayne, thank you so much for coming on. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
Sure. The simplest place, Tim, is uglymugmarketing.com. And thanks so much for the time.
You're welcome. And it's been a great chat. Thank you so much for coming on, Wayne, and sharing your insight.